Hello, everybody. I'm very
Hello.
pleased today, and we are just waiting for Zachuas Ogonji from Kenya. And meanwhile, we begin the talk with Neil Dougan from Australia and Peter Fenkart from Germany. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And not everybody knows you yet, so may I ask you to introduce yourself briefly, and then we jump middle into the discussion. Neil, are you going to start?
I can start. I can start for sure. So I'm Neil Dougan. I'm a medical intuitive based in Western Australia and originally a New Zealander. And I have a very wide practice with clients from all over the world for all kinds of issues. I'm recently an author, as Marianne was just talking to us about moments ago. With the onset of the COVID, I decided to write down some recollections of all of these years of working with clients all around the world. And so I wrote a book about the ego, for which I have an unusual approach to it. And then I wrote a book about the autistic spectrum, the autism spectrum, and the superpowers that people can actually achieve by exploring elements of the spectrum. And I'm in the spectrum myself. So I was an undiagnosed ADD, ADHD, and also dyslexic. And I didn't read and write until I was 14 years of age. I couldn't actually reliably read and write until then. I could read little bits and pieces. And it's been a constant struggle for me. But anyway, in my adult life, and particularly in my clinical practice, I began to realize that this autistic nature gave me insights into what was happening for patients to an extraordinary extent. Written another book on work that I've done with the microbiome. So these are the bacteria and fungi and so on that we have in our bodies. And it's called Conversations with Candida. And it literally relates to conversations that I've had with the populations of this fungus called Candida, which lives in people's bodies. And the main outcome of that was to be able to develop ways where we could cooperate and collaborate and come to an understanding with these microflora, so bacteria and fungus in particular. Obviously, given these COVID times, we've had a pretty good look at how we can interact with viruses as well. And there's an upcoming book on the topic of working with viruses. So we'll leave that topic, but it's certainly an interesting one. We've done work with what I call the unseen, which is the world, the paranormal world, the world of entities and spirits and such like. And that's very, very interesting to document that work that I've done with clients all over the world as well. And probably forgetting a book or so, but the last book, the one that I'm writing at the moment, is called Poorly Behaving Men, and it's a guidebook for women on how to cope with them. And it's really is detailing the destruction of the male role and what that actually means in terms of families and the relevance actually of men to be involved with families at all today in 2021. So that's proving to be pretty interesting. The other book sort of led me to that, the book that I've just published last weekend actually, and it's about the way in which civilization has actually changed over 130,000 years from what I can work out, and the major steps in that and what that actually means for us operating in 2021 today. So that's me. As I say, like I'm a therapist or healer, however you want to describe it, a medical intuitive, and I'm busy working here in Perth, Western Australia. So thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Peter?
Yes, I am Peter Simon Fenkart, and a strong believer. I'm convinced that the power, the potential of peoples is much higher than they believe by her own. Peoples are strong and powerful, but they don't live in that way. And I am coaching people which like to go farther than before, to explore themselves and to expand their life. And one point is making decisions. Making decisions is one of the biggest theme we all have for success, for the constructing their own life, making good decisions, making own decisions. And that is my point of view. A little bit is the theme from today. I've written a book in Germany. It's, you can say it, building strong roots in life. Growing a tree, building strong roots. That is my connection to the theme of today. Love it, change it, or leave it. I hope I can make any benefit for that.
You surely will. And yeah, we don't have to forget that you do extraordinary 3D virtual studio videos as image films for people. I'm myself profiting from that. So it's very important for me that we mention this and don't leave it out.
Okay, yes, that's me.
So we're still waiting for Zachuas. Sandra, maybe you could write him a message. I hope he didn't forget or has internet difficulties. So love it, change it, leave it. This is an old psychological paradigm. Either we love a situation, or if we don't love it, we feel the need to change it or to get back into peace with the situation we had, so to love it again, which the old Sufi tradition called conscious suffering. Maybe Neil, you later can talk about that. If we feel the need to change because we cannot go back, then there is the need to make a decision. And if we find ourselves in the very, very bad situation that it cannot change the situation, we finally have to overcome all our anxieties and leave it to have a new situation that we can again love. So this love it, change it, leave it can be applied to any system, relationship system, financial system, ecological system, economic system. And maybe, as Neil pointed out, the topic of the poorly behaving man in the Handbook of Women, we start with the relationship topic. Love it, change it, leave it in relationships. What does this mean? Neil, maybe you can start and point out a bit of that conscious suffering.
Certainly. I think the key element of what you're talking about is that you need to be sovereign. And Peter was beginning to actually touch onto this, is that it's not really possible to be able to actually even analyze this question of love it, change it, leave it, unless you can actually become sovereign. You have to actually be able to be in a position to be able to assess the data that you have available to you, and then to be able to, come to some type of conclusion. The idea of conscious suffering is that it comes from the concept that, we are in a place of suffering, and you can either do it consciously or unconsciously. And so we see the great masses of people suffering in an unconscious way. And I completely agree with Peter, is that we have the opportunity to do extraordinary things. And one of the most extraordinary things that we can do is that we can elect for change. And to elect for change, we're back to the issue of being sovereign, is that we recognize that we do have this possibility to elect for change. So that process of electing for change requires work. There's effort and work involved in it. And that's what the old Sufis described as conscious suffering. So it's difficult. The language is difficult. And I am so grateful for Peter, who's a German speaker too, as you are, Marianne, but, for you both to be putting up with me speaking in English. But it's this process of, literally coming to a place where you recognize yourself, that you are an individual of self, and then being able to go on from there. So that would be, my initial thoughts on this challenging topic. I think it's very interesting that you're broadening it, Marianne, to look at, issues such as ecology and so on, these things. Here in Australia, we've just gone into another lockdown. They've found a few more cases of the COVID here. And so they've locked the country up, more or less, the whole country. And, I heard this news this morning and I thought, well, the best thing to do is to go out and do some gardening. I'll talk to the worms because they make more sense than the politicians. And this is the issue of sovereignty. So like we have this sovereign possibility to do something. In my case, I would do some gardening. And what the unconscious suffering is that we go into panic because there's people catching the virus. And that would be unconscious suffering. So that's the difference between conscious suffering and unconscious suffering. Is that clear? Does that make sense?
Yes, of course, it does make sense. I didn't know that Australia went to another lockdown again.
Yeah.
The regions or the whole country?
I think there's one territory or one state that isn't, but all the others are. Pretty much the whole country.
So, have fun. And he actually went talking to the worms and did gardening because that's making more sense. Yes, I understand very much.
And it's a sovereign thing to do. I chose not to enter into the suffering of the people of Australia. I chose not to. And this is what Peter's talking about. It's the business of making choice. And that we actually have the possibility to make wonderful choices. But to do that, we actually have to start from a place of being sovereign.
And Peter, for the possibility to make a choice, you have to make clear decisions. Mm-hmm. Maybe you could talk a bit more on how to make good or clear decisions.
This decision making is the most important part of the self-construction of life. To me, you never learned this in school. You learn to get knowledge and to accept knowledge without checking the knowledge. Checking the knowledge, knowledge is not knowledge to me, it's just information. If you are keeping knowledge, you're just storing information. And for decision making, it is not enough to base on information, because information can have value, but no meaning. Meaning is not part of the information. Meaning, the only source for meaning is the internal, is the feeling from inside. Meaning is, for example, the value and meaning. Value, how have your children? Neil, for example, have you a child? Neil?
Neil, do you have children?
Four children.
Four children, okay. Which is the value for the children? How much are they worth, the children's, your children's?
No value.
Yeah, okay. That's the difference. They have meaning. The meaning, they have purpose. And the source of purpose or value is not within information. And comes from inside your mind, inside your feelings. You have feelings for the children, I suppose. Yeah? And there is no value. We cannot talk about value. That is meaning and purpose. And if you're making decisions, that is the point, the question. We mostly based on informations from outside. We asking someone, what should I do? What should I do? But we should ask ourselves inside, what is my feeling about that? What is the meaning of alternate 1 or alternate 2? And if we do that, we get the meaning, the decisions back to us from our feelings, from our best mind inside, from our unconsciousness, then we make good decisions most of the time.
Oh, I see.
It's wonderful to hear you talking about it, Peter. And the way I view this in therapy with people is that we have perception. So we think about the physical senses, and then we have the subtle variation of the physical senses. So I was working with a client this morning, and we were talking about the subtle sense of smell. And this lady could smell a rat. She could smell a problem. She could smell the rat was the men that she was with. And this is the perception. This is the data, and it's actually some meaning associated with the data. Once the data is assembled, then you need to find context. So, in preparation for the decision-making process that you're talking about, it's the formulation of context. And to do that, you need to access memories. And what I noticed, like time and time and time again in therapy, is that clients resist accessing not only the data from the outside world, but also the data from the inside world, but more importantly, the data from their memories. So unless you can bring all three strands of that information together, you can't possibly then begin to actually find context from which you could go about making some decisions. So it's really intriguing to hear you saying this from the other side of the world. It's precisely what I observe too. it's precisely. What's been your experience, Marianne, with your work?
Quite the same. If you're not able to perceive, any decision will be poor. And a lot of people just exclude data, go to a very small reality, which they know, create a context within that reality, and within that little circle, they try to make decisions that are in context with the whole world, and that never will go well. So what I mainly see is this self-verifying circles of realities, wherein people make decisions that exclude any data from the outside. Such like, I don't want to hear criticism, I don't want to hear feedback. So change will never happen.
The best part of this is our unconsciousness keeps all information from outside. Mm-hmm. We have acquired in our whole life, all informations. We are complete inside. We have all informations inside. If we have,
at least we have the access. If we look on the morphogenetic field or the hive mind, we have access to an outrageous amount of data if we want. Mm-hmm. Or when I think of our colleague Grigory Grabovoi, who says he likes to make decisions from the point of the all-knowing because then it's more easy.
Pete, I wonder if you could just explain a little bit more for us on this question of, how you observe the data being all available in what you're calling the unconscious, just because the words are very tricky. the words are very tricky. I just want to make sure that we're all understanding each other.
Okay. For example, you have to choose between two jobs, and you have experienced the interview at a company, and you have seen the website, and you have taking time to evaluate that firm A and that firm B. You have all possible information inside you, but it's unconsciousness. So, and then you are able to feel what is the right decision. The facts are one job is more money than the other. And mostly people, I suppose, are choosing the more money job. But sometimes it could be better to choose the job which is going to the heart, because the expansion and the possibilities and the power are much higher in that. So, and therefore you cannot use information from outside. You have to put information from outside in your subconscious by evaluating, and then you are able to drive your personal decision. You cannot make a checklist, or for example, you're choosing a partner for life. Do you make a checklist? So, some people do this in the internet portals, which are getting together. I don't know the name. The portals which are combining people, dating portals. Okay, they are sometimes based on facts, but all important decisions in life are not based on facts, but on feelings, on deep feelings. And if you ignore these feelings, you make a bad decision, I suppose.
Yeah, I think this is a very German point of view, making fact-based decisions.
Yes. Yes.
Well, I don't think I've ever met anybody in this part of the world who actually would get into a relationship based on facts.
But other decisions, the job, you are choosing your job by facts.
I think the motivation for doing these decisions. I completely agree with you that largely these things are from the subconscious, but like choosing a partner for life or a job would be just as likely to be driven by a sexual drive. So it could be just eros. Marianne's been doing this coaching around love, and it can just be eros, which is actually the number one decision point. And it's an unreliable place to actually base your decision from. And but equally, having a fact checklist, this would be an unreliable place. And when it all comes down to it, it's going to be the subconscious of some sort or other will drive the decision-making process that you're looking at. And I've seen people make absolutely dreadful decisions based on their emotions as well. Because the emotions get all tangled up in, say, for example, a person feels a duty or an obligation of an emotional type to get into a relationship. And they will use that emotion of duty and obligation, which is different to responsibility, and they'll act on it. They'll act on guilt. They'll act on shame. You think of the number of cases of people, entering into relationships based on these things, and a lack of self-regard, and all of those things would be sitting in the subconscious. Like there's a subconscious element, but the decision, it comes across. In those cases, it comes across from an emotion. It's actually a feeling. A feeling drives the poor decision. So I understand where you're coming from, but it's so complicated, and the language is so difficult.
And there are cultural differences as well. It's not only the language thing, but making a real conscious decision is not an easy thing, as we see. There are a lot of, let's say, extrinsic and intrinsic factors to observe. And what we didn't talk about yet is instinct-based decisions.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we had intellectual, fact-based, or practical mind, fact-based decisions. We didn't have ethical-based decisions yet. We didn't have social-based decisions yet, and we definitely didn't have instinct-based decisions, which is a different thing again. What would you say? Finally, Zach is coming.
Yeah. So what you're talking about there are the different minds, Marianne, and the way in which we would make decisions from them, and how unreliable or reliable those could be. And I was talking about the case of being able to smell a rat. Well, that's an instinctive process. You can smell a rat, you can smell a problem, and a decision based on that type of instinctive unconscious element would be very, very useful. And you were talking also, Marianne, about these practical based decisions. So I've seen plenty of people making a decision about a job because not because of the facts, which would be an intellectual process. They make it based on what's practical. The place is nearer to me. I have less traveling. They've got better hours of operation, so it fits in with my family. These very practical decisions that people will make. Here's Zach.
Hi, Zach.
Hi, Zach.
Nice to meet you. We can't hear you because your mic is not open.
Sorry, I'm very sorry to join late. Sorry, I'm an assistant bishop in our church, and I had to go to church first, and I thought it was 1:30. Yes, but I'm happy to be here.
Okay, thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us. And may I introduce Peter Fenkart to you? You don't know him yet. Is a German colleague who is a coach for the intuition and is doing 3D virtual videos as image films for companies and coaches.
Yes.
And Neil, you already know.
Hi, Zach.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Zach, for those who don't know you yet, you are a school director in Kenya. Is the school open again?
Yes, schools are open again. Actually, we are about to close the term, but yeah, schools are back.
And you're happy to have the children back?
Very much, actually. It's sort of very relieving. It's like your mission was taken away by something, and then it was returned.
Okay.
Yes.
So our topic today is love it, change it, leave it. And
yes.
We were just in the middle of the discussion how to make useful decisions. And at the moment we were talking about instinct-based decisions, which are not coming from the emotions, not coming from the intellect, but from the pure instinct smelling danger.
Yes. That's very interesting.
Infinity, yeah.
Peter?
Yes. Anknüpfen an Neil, as I would continue from Neil. Neil has a good point. Feelings alone are not base of good decisions. Feelings alone. Yeah. Because there are several sources of feelings. We have to distinct. We have to keep them apart. It's the heart and the belly. I say the belly, lower regions, for example. Your Bedürfnisse, your needs, and your aggressions and your bad feelings, which are located mostly in the belly, for example. and a higher level of feelings, which is from the heart, for example, which are leveling, levelizing. So yeah, if you make a cut between, you can see which emotion is coming from which region, and you cannot trust feelings from the belly. Okay, you have some. You have to rely on your heart of your. Okay. Your additions should be based on your heart feelings, not on your belly feelings. That's my point. So
I think, Peter, what you wanted to say is be cautious to not make your decisions on greed and profit motive, which usually comes from the belly. But instinct can come from the belly too, and then it's okay. But mostly people who make poor decisions base their decisions on greed, and they don't even know it. Because the ego is very good in masking that and giving good explanations on why you have to make the decision this way. An ego can be a tricky thing. Neil, you wanted to say something?
Oh, it's just, I'm thinking of the incredible work that Zach does in Kenya, and which is based so strongly on the heart. So there's so much heart intention behind the work. There's also, in terms of the decision making, there's so much just basic instinctive good decision making that sits there as well. So Zach just knows the decisions to make, and they're not all coming directly from love. They're coming from what is practical, what's going to work, and it's not, that doesn't have to be controlled by an intellectual process. It's just, Zach, as he goes about his life, he knows what to do. And I'm just interested, to hear from you, Zach, about how you are, well, how it is that you get to make such good decisions. Like what is underpinning this track record that you have of such good decisions?
Wow, thank you. And I'm very grateful to be here and to be part of this discussion. And actually, talking about instincts and the decisions you make sometimes from the belly and sometimes from the heart. And I agree with Neil that all these decisions are sometimes not very easy. Actually, you can't rely on what you learned in the university to make them. It really comes from a point of interaction, having interacted with the people, with the environment, and having done so for quite some time, not just once. It's not a pop-in thing that you pop in and then you assume you understand and you know what is supposed to be the right decision. I think when you live in something and when you live through a process, when you encounter the everyday situations, I think your instincts become more sharpened and you are able to tell that this direction is better. But I think also what is even more intriguing or interesting is the fact that as you make this decision, you now have to look into you have to think about the future. What does this decision mean going forward? So I might have one opportunity and I have 2 or 3 people who want that opportunity. And I have to make a decision, who do I go for? In this case, if I can use an example, maybe it's a mother, it's a child, and then there's an old man. So when you look at all of them, you find they are in need and this opportunity will help. But then when you think about it, you realize the child has longer, in our context, the child has longer period ahead of them in terms of what they need and the challenges they have to face. And sometimes with the older people here, there is the situation is so hopeless that you cannot really help much. And despite if you really want to help, you will just be like dealing with a bottomless basket. So you have to make a decision: do you invest in the child that in future then they don't have to be like the old people that we have now, or do you invest in the old people and then end up just doing the cycle back and forth? But I think you rely more on the experience, you rely more on the reliving these things, being in that environment for quite some time. Your instincts get strengthened and you get to understand that even if you consult others, even if you learn from what others are doing, at the end of the day, it comes back to very personal decisions. So I do have a team. I work with teams all the time. I create teams. We consult together. We discuss each and everything together. But at the end of the day, you listen to all these voices, what people have said, their ideas, their suggestions, their opinion on issues, and it comes down to what informs the best decision to be made is what you feel at the end of the day. So what is in your heart? What do you see as the best? But I think what I've really enjoyed is the idea that when you make the right decision, sometimes it doesn't mean that that right decision will please people or will be the people will run, jump, and like it, but you feel the peace. You know that you made the right call, and that is even if someone else was to look at it, they will not, they will not come up with any other decision. And I think also the other thing I've really been able to do well is give chances. Giving chances, it means you allow yourself not to throw out stuff in the first instance. Like you come across someone who needs help and then you dismiss them. Or when you are helping someone, they do something wrong and then you dismiss them. So I usually tell all the team members and the people I work with, I'll give up on you the fourth time, at least after trying 4 times. So it means we try, I help you, we work through it. If it works in the first instance, congratulations to us. But if it fails, we try again. We keep trying again until, even when we say, even when I tell you it refused to work, it will be best that everybody will say you really tried, you really gave it the best you got. So I think sometimes as you work and give things chance, don't just go in expecting them to work. Your instincts get shaped in the process, and you find that even though some of the things might have not worked as you expected, they really turned out better, and you are at peace with the process. You accept the results because you really lived through them, and you really know that there could have not been another way to do it because you really gave it all the best.
Thank you, Zach. There's a lot of wisdom in your words. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And what I really liked is this not giving up, giving a few chances, talking in teams, hearing many voices, and finally make a decision that you are in peace with. That gives you this inner peace of knowing I'm going for that. For myself, it reminds me of a very good grandma, a very wise female in reality, at least in my culture. We would we would think of this kind of decision making from a very wise grandma. Don't know whether how is the culture in your country. I don't know you that good yet, but is it usual for males in Kenya to think like that? Or did you get this kind of thinking from your mom and your grandma?
Wow. I'm laughing because I spent better part of my childhood living with my grandma and my mother in the village. My father spent most of the time working in the city because when young men or when you become of age, the tendency here is you go to the city to look for a job and employment. And in the generation of my mother, the mother stayed at home taking care of the children, and the husband would come once in a while, maybe during April holidays or during December holidays, or sometimes if they didn't get any money during the year, they will not come at all. They will prefer to send the little they have rather than spend it on transport to come home and then they reach empty-handed. So this meant I, together with my 9 siblings, I grew up in a family of 9 siblings. We were 10, but one died. We relied a lot on our mother and our grandmother, although she passed on at some point. But what I learned from living with my mom is she had to carry the weight all the time. And that means make a lot of decisions. And she didn't have the advantage of, and even my grandma, all of them didn't go to high school, they didn't go to college, they didn't have any professional training. They depended on the environment they lived in, what worked. They depended on seasons. They depended on, rain comes at this time, so we need to plant. They depended on what had been passed down.
Oh, internet problem? But probably you wanted to say what has passed. Oh, here you're back again.
Yes, someone was calling me. So in that moment, there's little interference with education or professional thinking, really. It's just people shaping their life around the realities of life. We want to eat. It's time for us to plant. It is time for us to work so we can be able to get what we need. And I think as I lived through that for about 14 years before I came to the city to join high school, a lot of what we did even as children was to help around. You don't just sit around. I remember we used to go to sell firewood together with my brothers. We go to the market, and then at the end of the day, after you have made a few coins, you decide. You buy paraffin for lighting the house. You buy vegetable. You buy, and your mom will not tell you what to do because you left home in the morning with the firewood. You know the challenges that were at home. So when you go to the market and you are there, you have sold whatever you went to sell. It is you to use your mind to see what will help us this evening rather than any other thing like sweets or whatever. So I think that kind of growth that is what shaped me. And as I come later on to into professional lives, I think I start from a point of that basic knowledge that this is what needs to be done and this is how it should be done. And now with, even when I went to university, actually, I used to attend university at part-time. As part-time, I used to go in the evening. During the day, I spent time going around working with women on kiosks, food kiosks, sharing with them how they can improve their business, being in the community and interacting with the community. And when I go to school and we learn some theories, those theories mostly used to shape what I had seen in the field, what I had experienced in the field. So I think I started from the other side rather than where many people start with school and then you go to the field to apply what you have learned. I learned a lot in the field and then I went to school just to sort of formalize what I had already come across. So I think in that process, I've learned a lot of things. I've experienced a lot of natural happenings and it guides me when it comes to interacting with people, making decisions, knowing how best to approach things rather than just looking at them from an intellectual perspective.
It's interesting. So in one way, you come from a matriarchal perspective.
Yes, I can say that confidently.
Wow. So we really have a point here that coming from a matriarchal perspective probably will make you a better decision maker.
Yes, and I think it actually tends to happen more because especially in the African context, the women, and especially the generation of my mother, didn't have school knowledge. They had it very limited, you know. So all the decisions they made was based on what? Instincts. You know, it was based on reality of life, not based on what they read in books or whatever. And I think that really shapes certain values in terms of humility, you know, being someone who can accommodate others, basic values of and principles of life, rather than what makes sense in the economy, or what makes sense in the marketplace, or what makes sense, you know, because if it's feeding, people need to feed, and we are few of us here, so what do we do? As much as what we are feeding might not be the best, but we fed anyway. So the idea is, when you look at the men side, men were favored, and they still had a privilege to go to school. They mostly worked. They mostly spent a lot of time in the industries, and they tend often to think about economies, think about savings, think about what makes sense. You know, we can't buy this, we have to buy this, or they have to base their decisions on some principles they have learned in school, or they have learned as they pursue the capitalist, the capital nature of things. But I think for the women, it's more passionate, more compassion, you know, building love, kindness, you know, around these values. And even as we went to church in the village, many of the churches there were made of women. Many of the families there were made of women, the community, because men had left to go and work. So you see, it shapes a lot in terms of the values we have.
Great. I never knew that.
Yes.
But I think this is the main cause of your personal success.
Yeah, I can say that. I can say that. So,
my colleagues, please answer. Answer to that topic. We found here very interesting thing.
If we are talking about decision making, love it, change it, or leave it. If this is about decision making, it should be written, love it, change it, and let it be. Then most of people are not making decisions at all at points in life which could be easily changed, for example, or decided to love this. There are some events in life which are not as comfortable, not as easy as I think. For example, lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
Lockdown is a big interruption in life, and you can try to love it, try to change it, or let it be. So love it would be, what is your chance in this situation? Means to find a way to love the situation.
Find peace with it.
Neil, you talk about lockdown at the beginning, and have you learned to love this situation a little bit? The lockdown, the failures. You could not change it, I suppose, but you can learn to love it. Have you learned to love the situation? Hey, you have to make the best. Have you make lemonade from citron?
Yeah, did you understand?
Yeah, I do understand. So how do you go about finding peace and to be able to love whatever it is that life is delivering up? And you know, Zach is talking about the experience of the men when he was growing up, and they would go off to work in the city, and sometimes they wouldn't have the work, and so they couldn't bring the money home. It's very, very difficult in that situation to find you know, to find some acceptance, to find some peace about those circumstances. And yet, sitting inside of all of that, there is always an opportunity to find love and compassion and understanding. So very challenging. And, you know, I know that for, you know, many people in Kenya, it's, you know, the role of the church. And, you know, Zach's explaining that he's a bishop. And so the role of the church and belief is an incredible help for people to be able to actually get to a place where they have some compassion and understanding for, you know, the suffering and these things that we were talking about before. And as Peter was mentioning, this business of being able to make lemonade from the lemon, he's talking about the citron, and you know, it's being able to make a nice drink from the bitter fruit is an extraordinary you know, process. And indeed, it's what we're all engaged in all the time, is to actually be able to take the suffering, the casual suffering of our environment, and find compassion and understanding and love within that. And you know, the route to do that is very, very challenging. And for, you know, those mothers who are left back at the village, it must have been incredibly difficult when the men weren't able to bring some money home. Very, very, very difficult. And yet the opportunity existed there for the husband and the wife to have love for each other and compassion and understanding for each other. So it remains, the possibility remains, no matter how difficult you know, the circumstances are. And we were talking earlier about the, you know, the lockdown and the suffering that came out of the lockdown. And the lockdown is an element of the environment, and it's just something you cannot control. Like, there's nothing that we can do. I was saying, Zach, that Australia has gone into another lockdown today, or over the last few days, different states. And there's nothing I can do, or anybody else on the street, about the fact that the government is making the decision. They make the decision. Now I'm sitting in the circumstances. This is the environment, the data and the environment. I now get the choice about what I do with it. Do I want to find peace? Do I want to find, you know, to have love and caring and compassion for my neighbors and for other people who are suffering? Or do I want to lose myself in the suffering myself? I make this choice. And the four of us on the call here, we all do this. You know, we actually understand that process of being able to make a choice. And the choice is, do I suffer or do I, you know, make some struggle and some choice and you know, do some different things. And, you know, I just so fascinated to hear, Zach, when you were talking about the compassionate process of actually giving it a chance and again and again. And in our culture, in Australia, people are not commonly given a second chance. If they make one mistake, they're cut. And so I'm very interested to hear that heart-based approach, which is, I see you. I see that you've made a mistake. I see that you've made an error in what you're doing. I can see that you recognize it. How about we try again? And I think this is the, you know, like this absolute gold in what you're talking about.
Yes.
That's my thought on what's being talked about there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's absolute wisdom.
Yes, and maybe I just want to add on that. The whole idea starts with where are we coming from, and often I think I come from where I have explained where my mother started, where we lived in the village. Maybe my children will come from a very different place because I'm raising them in the city. I'm focusing on different things that I consider priorities. They are not coming from the same place where I came from, and their perspective will be different. While I may be able to avoid complaining and being satisfied with what I have, they might see life differently, and complaining might be their portion because then they are not coming from a place where I came from. So I think teaching and passing down these values and helping the children reconnect from where we are coming from. If at all the values that we are living today we consider them to be the best that are helping us to live a good life, we really need to take our children past us. They don't need to start from us. They need to start from a little bit back from where we started, plug into the life that was there before, and then help them build into the future. Because as I live through this life, no matter what happens, there is a place I'm coming from, a place of need, a place of struggle, a place of challenge that really shapes my values in terms of how I see the world and how I interact with it.
Yes.
More than I had when I started. And I might find a generation later, they are stuck in a place where if there's a lockdown, they don't know what to do with it. So for me, if there's a lockdown and there is a place that Peter is alluding to, I'm able to, find alternatives. I'm able to think and say, okay, this is what is happening, because probably this is not the first pandemic or the first worst situation I'm living through. I've lived through others. And when I look at it, the pandemic has been bad across the world. But here in Africa and in Kenya specifically, I think it hasn't been that bad in terms of if you look at other challenges that people go through on a day-to-day basis. So even the issues that people struggled with here are not about the pandemic itself. It was about hunger. We are going to die of hunger if there is a lockdown, meaning hunger is a bigger threat than the pandemic itself. People are willing to violate the rules because they want to survive. They want food, they want other things. So the priorities really and where we come from and what is important at a particular time, for me, will help us to find peace in a particular situation, understand it, and have a bigger dimension of things. Now, I'm not saying this to say maybe because in the Western world, people are coming from a certain point where if you look at what happened before, they could have handled the situation better because the generation that just came from the World War had more resilience, had more perseverance, they had values of hard work and all that. But the generation we have now didn't go through World War, didn't experience the difficulties of World War before World War, and might tend to come from a point of privilege, might tend to come from a point of everything being available on their phone or whatever. And when something as lockdown happens, it becomes devastating to them. They don't know how to handle it. They have never handled something as challenging as a lockdown. While a generation that lived before World War might see, okay, this is another thing that is coming, and they are better prepared to handle it. So I really see that the way we handle situations and the way we respond to it in terms of whether we get peace or not really depends on how prepared we are, where we are coming from, in terms of how exposed are we to similar situations before. Maybe if there will be another pandemic in future, this generation will handle it better. They will be more calm, more peaceful. If there's a generation that is going into the pandemic for the first time and they have never experienced it. So I think when we're looking at these things, we need to look at also how prepared people are. Even as we advise them, as we talk to them, we need to understand, have they experienced something like this before? Is it the first time? And unfortunately, government don't have time for that. they don't understand that maybe we are dealing with this generation or this generation. And so they just say there's lockdown, and then they run into problems with younger people trying to violate the rules. It's because maybe these younger people have not experienced something as complex as this, So I think all those comes into perspective in terms of how we respond. But for me, the idea is, do we want to complain first, or do we want to seek the understanding of the situation and then create our own personal peace? And then do we have alternatives? Many times I keep telling my team members that you can complain or you can do something about it. And the problem of complaining is it shields you, it closes you down, it makes you paralyzed. You can't even move because you started with complaining. So if you start by complaining about a situation, it really closes your ability to see alternatives that are in that situation. But if you start with an open mind and say, okay, this is a lockdown, so what do we do now that we are locked down? It opens your mind to see alternatives, to see things that you can be able to do, things that you can find peace in. And I know people have picked up new habits. I bought a new guitar. I started learning how to play a guitar during lockdown when I'm in the house more time. So if you start with it from a point of openness and opening your mind that, this is happening, so how do I approach it? Rather than, it's another lockdown again. When you start to complain, it closes the opportunities for you to see how can you create peace for yourself. But when you confront that situation with positivity and looking at it like, okay, it's coming, it's complex, I don't understand it, but can I learn from it? What are the opportunities in there? What are the spaces in there that I can feel peaceful? I can be peaceful, I can create peace for the people around me. I can ensure that there's chance for us to go through this situation. And especially with the lockdown, people need to prepare long term because you don't know how long it will go. And sometimes you start very well, but in between you run out of ideas and you go back to as if you never started well at all, So you need to have in your basket enough ideas, enough things. You need to be creative. Even as you're in the lockdown, try more things, open up to possibility of many things. And I think that way, so if it becomes the center of attention, then unfortunately it will really crowd you and it will just suck the energy out of you, and I'm sure you'll not be able to.
So we see that resistance is cutting down our perception and is cutting us off of data and creativity. Michael,
yes, exactly.
Please respond to Zach. Neil?
Well, to me, it's the process of making context from the perception. That's the process, and out of that comes the opportunity to make decisions. And I've been talking with educators in the last couple of weeks. So we've been talking about the idea of different ways of approaching education. And in the past, over the many thousands of years, education has been used to help the powerful remain powerful. So this has been the mechanism. And in every country, like it doesn't matter what country in the world you're in, education is used to control people. And if we change that around, and I know, Zach, you're running a school there, and Peter, the work that you do is really about learning. It's about that opportunity that people have for learning. And if you are focusing on the inquiry, so we have inquiry into what's happening in the environment, what's happening inside of ourselves, what our memories are. If we have that focus on that inquiry, then we have an opportunity to make completely different decisions. If we're not, rather than we're actually going back to, this is historically how we have done things. And, what Zach's talking about is that the comparison between his mother's generation and the generation of his children. And even in that short space of time, there has been a shift. There's been a shift to the way in which the data is interpreted. And what's changed? The change has been in the context. So the context of the young people today is different to the context of the people in the grandparents' time. It's a change in that context. And but it's still all is context. At the end of the day, we still have context, and context is based on our dogma, our beliefs, our collected beliefs. So all of the beliefs of all the people who are like us, we share these collected beliefs, and that's dogma. And from that dogma, we recognize the limitations. So the dogma actually creates a limitation to how we can work with and use our perception. So all of these things are complicated. It's a complicated process, and you know, we come back to what Peter introduced right at the very beginning, which is if you're able to actually have a heart, and by heart I mean here now not so much emotional, but if it's a spiritual based view of what's going on, then it overcomes many of the context issues which are really of the minds. So any of the minds, you know, the 5 minds that we work with, it's the context is locked in there, and it's locked in the egoic elements and the dogma, which we all share. So within a culture, everybody's sharing these collective ego, and that's what dogma is. And you know, the more that we're actually able to get into an inquiry basis, where we are inquisitive and we want to find our way through and actually find what's sitting underneath the truth all the time, then we have a chance to make some better decisions. So that's my thoughts about what Zach's talking about. Sorry if I've diverted off onto a different track, but yeah.
No, absolutely okay. One other point that I would like to hit is there's no change without change.
Absolutely.
So some people, they're telling I change or I want to change it, but in reality, if it comes down to the point to really take action and make a change and go through a change, they're reluctant.
Yes, that is very beautiful, because sometimes actually people want to change, but they don't know what they want to change to. They actually even don't know what are we changing in the first place. And when it comes to the details of what change might mean, it scares them, because then there's a lot that is required of them to do, and that is what keeps them away from pursuing change. Today, I was actually talking about, in church, I had an opportunity to speak, and I was talking about transition and what the instability that comes with transitioning, which is actually change itself. And I gave a very simple example. There was a time I moved from one slum where I was living to another slum. But because the new slum where I went to, I didn't have friends, I didn't know anyone, you know, I was new. I often found myself going back to the old slum to just feel comfortable, feel safe, feel that I'm familiar here, and things work here better than they work on the other place. I could actually just go to the new place to sleep. But as time goes by, I became comfortable. I started to get new friends. I started to get new interesting places to go to in the new place I had moved. And then I ended up spending now more time to the new place and less time in the old place. So I think that is what change means to me sometimes, that we want to change, but at the very transition of change itself, there is the old and the new. There is the new phase we are going into, and people really struggle to survive in the new phase because there's a lot of uncertainties. There's a lot of new decisions you have to make. You are less equipped. You don't have a lot of knowledge about what is happening in the new space. So you feel to be safe. You go back to where you know. You go to familiar places. You go to familiar people. You talk about familiar topics. You know, you want to interact with the things that you are aware of. But I think those who are courageous enough to start to build new opportunities in the new spaces, in the new places where they have gone, where the shift has happened, eventually transition successfully, and they are able now to be those change agents that we say, hey, those people are able to make change happen because they resisted the appeal of the old, the new things, the familiar things they knew about in the old, and went on to pursue opportunities in the new space that is there. So I think even after the pandemic, after this lockdown, there is a change that we are required to make. You know, there are people who will say we'll go back to our old ways. There are people who will push on into the new space. You know, and that struggle, that resistance of do we go into the new phase? Do we find the new opportunities? Do we live as if the past was not there? Yes, it was there. Yes, we lived through it. but now it's behind us, and this is the new things that we are pursuing. Versus those who want to say, no, the past is with us. This is how we have lived. The pandemic just put a full stop, but we have to continue with it without accepting the new reality. So I think the way you have said, people want to change sometimes, but the struggle is really, really huge in terms of what happens then after we change. And when you look at it from the economic perspective, change means people losing business, people losing money, people losing things they knew, people things they owned, you know. So that makes a huge resistance. And in a market economy where things are really driven by economy, change does not become sweet in the essence that it should be. But I think if you love something, as per the topic, you change it. When you change it, you make it better, because you leave a mark on it for the people who comes after.
Again, very wise words. I see your granny did well.
Yeah.
And yes, this is the opportunity of change, to not get tied down by the past, to venture upon the future, to venture upon the new, and to make something better of it.
Yes.
Change to the better. But it means, and it definitely means, that the past is gone. And this is what people are so scared about.
Yes.
I remember a poem from a very famous German poetry, Hermann Hesse. It's called Steps, Stufen. And in that poem, he did write about this used to be things that hold you back. And only the one who can venture beyond will eventually make his life and his peace.
Mhm.
Peter?
Yes. If you talk about love it, change it or leave it, we have learned, as I remember, if you are in a situation which you cannot change, or cannot leave, for example, a lockdown, you have to learn to love it, to arrange it, to keep it, to work with it, because Zach has told we're keeping our power only then when we are enabling us, when we are keeping trying. We have no job, for example, but I keep trying to get a job, for example. And if I try to love the situation, to love means I accept, I take this. Laughing is not only this. Laughing is in a relation, for example, and the change. Love it is love the situation. Change would be don't change the other person. Change your own person. Change yourself, or leave it. Leave it. It could be an opinion sometimes, but in my relationship, I've been over 30 years, and it is love is very sophisticated concept. And I always try to understand it. But love is not only to have good feelings. Love is to accept, to try, to give all of yourself. And it is not limited to relations. It's also in life, in the perspective of life. If you take this sentence by his words, love it, change it, or leave it, it would be accept life, modify life, or suicide. And that is not the meaning, to my opinion. It is not talk about the outside, it's your inside. You have to take the inside. Leave it means take these things, these thoughts in you, these memories, and put them aside. Leave them go. Let them go. Leave it. As Marianne has told, I understand. You have to arrange with your past. Yeah, you have to change your own business and to love the situation, love in a bigger amount as anyone can imagine. As I laughing means a relationship to life, an interaction to life, and to keep this relationship and to interact, keeping interaction. For this phrase is true to me, but I have found this interpretation also in the talk from you, Neil and Zach and Marianne. I got a bigger understanding of this phrase now.
Oh, thank you.
Very much.
Thank you. I think in the end you were talking about what the Greek called agape. This great conditionless love. This is what is just flowing, just compassion for everything and everybody without asking anything back. We
Yes,
can
and
do that ourselves. We don't need to wait till we are holy.
yes, and when you talk about agape, is very interesting because sometimes I found people saying, you don't have to be that kind, too very kind. You don't have to be very nice. You know, people will take advantage of you. And I think it's the reality that if someone takes advantage of you, but you have really mastered the aspect of love and you are doing it unconditionally, it's about them, you know, not you, you know, because you went out with an open heart to help and to love and to do what you can do. If they exploit you, you don't lose, they lose, because then you stay peaceful. You stay knowing that I did what I did the best way I could do it out of love, you know. And I think that is the most difficult part, because when people say I'm going to do, I'm loving and I'm kind, they are quick to complain when someone does something small against them, and that distracts you. It's like it distracts you from what your focus is. So what I found is when you have it and when you understand what love is, for example, if I'm a husband and I truly love my wife, and then she takes advantage of that to do whatever, I remain peaceful. That if I start complaining and saying she took advantage of me, she did this, then I lose it. But if I accept that I did out of love and I still have a lot of it flowing and continuously, that will drive my wife at some point to realize she was the one on the fault. She took advantage of what was good. But for me, I remain in a peaceful place. And I think this applies a lot in the work that I do in the community, because you go in the community, you work with people, you have very good intentions to support, to do the best, but then you find people who are just there willing to take advantage of you, exploit you. Even in one of our school, after we distribute food and support the community, there's one person who comes around and breaks the office, the store, and steals food. Now, we really have a choice to cry and get angry with the community and say they don't see the help we are giving, they don't see the good things, or we have to continue now on our path of spreading more love, spreading more good work, spreading more good values. And eventually, these people will see that this is like a stream that is just flowing and continuously. And it is either they start to do the right thing, or eventually it's them who will lose, you know. So sometimes we go into loving and into giving this good feeling of loving, but we have conditions that we have put on them. In our mind, we have limitations and barriers that we have put for ourselves. And the moment someone does something against us, we react. We are quick to jump in and condemn and forget all about love and start to hit back, start to revenge, become even more angry, and then we lose the whole concept. So when you are talking about agape unconditional, you should be at a place where you just let it flow, you know. Those who will come in and do good benefit from it and spreads it further. Those who will come in and do wrong things and take advantage of it eventually will realize they can't stop it, they can't finish it, they can't. You know, they can't do anything. You just continue being what limitation, or we want to support, or we want to give it. But the moment something that we do not like, confrontational, we judge, we throw all the tantrums we can, I think sometimes limits the continuous flow.
Yes, it reminds me on the sun. The sun's just shining.
Yes.
And if you come too close to the sun, you burn yourself.
Yes.
And it's this kind of love, it's just shining.
Yes.
And you can't limit it. You can't use it up. Neil, you smile so much.
Oh, just loving listening to this. It's wonderful to hear everybody speaking. And it's unconditional love that you're talking about, and it's endless. And I know my recent book, I've been looking at the profit motive and how the profit motive actually is driving the destruction of humans. And this idea that we wish to take advantage of another person for our own benefit is what sits underneath the need to make a profit. All of it is relating to a duality, and the duality is the duality of scarcity. So we do not have enough. And on the other side of the duality of scarcity is we want to find surplus. We want to hold on to as much surplus as we possibly can. And what Zach is talking about is the opposite process, where we have no intention to make a profit. Our only intention is to serve. And we're serving, and we're serving, and we're serving. No matter what anybody else is doing, we continue to serve. And I'm sure Peter, and I know for a fact that Marianne works in the same way, is that we intend all the time. Each day when we wake up in the morning, we wake up and we have the intention to serve without seeking rewards for ourselves. And I'm sure, Peter, this applies to you. I don't know you so well, but I'm sure it also applies to you as well. We just want to serve. We want to continue to give and to work from our heart, you know, so, and that is the only intention. And as, you know, Marianne is saying, you know, it's like the sun. We have to be like the sun. We have to continue shine. We have to continue to shine.
And the interesting thing is that we have scarcity and surplus as polarity. But once we venture on serving, unconditional serving, the polarity is abundance.
You jump out of the polarity altogether. You absolutely leave the polarity, the duality behind, and you come into a place of abundance. And this is what Zach was talking about with his mother and his grandmother, is that even though it was hard times in the village, there was still abundance. And the abundance was the love of everybody for everybody else. And this is the real abundance that was sitting there, and they make decisions based on what was happening with the seasons, as Zach was talking about. You know, when the rain comes, we sow the seeds and we get ready for the growing season. All these things which are very practical, but the real abundance is the love that was actually available within the family. That's the real abundance, and it's available to everybody. Love is everywhere. We can all experience love, and it is completely abundant.
Yes, and the rest is some weird context in the mind. Belief program.
The rest of it is a very weird context. You're quite right. Marianne, I'm actually running a bit short of time, I'm sorry, but...
We are all running a bit short of time. I think we are at the point where we go for our last sentences. Just do a quick resume and leave the sentences you want to give to our audience. And then we close the talk.
Yes, so I think I'm very grateful for the discussion, although I came in a bit late, I apologize. But it has been a very enriching conversation, because sometimes the topics you come across is the economics, the politics, the what, but just talking about people and love and these simple yet fulfilling principles of life, people are not paying attention to. And I think what we have done today is to enrich that the far we can go is if we know who we are and the strength we have in us, and know that we can do as much as we can, regardless of what is happening outside, beyond our control. If we stay focused on who we are, what do we want to achieve, then nothing will stop us. We will flow, and sometimes we'll not measure ourselves by success or failure itself, because what is it? What is failure in itself? What is success in itself? We will just be contented and satisfied that we have done what we could do with the possibilities and the opportunities that we had. And I think that's what we need to focus on. If you can help one, help one. If you can help two, help two. If you can, there is this common saying that says, if you can't run, crawl. If you can't, walk, run, do whatever. So the essence is, what can you do? Even if it's just to smile for someone, and you feel with the smile you've changed something, do it. Rather than sitting there and feeling helpless, feeling that I should change the world, I should do a big thing for me to have changed something. I think really adjusting inside yourself, change even if it's something very small, and then just feel peaceful that you did what you could do with the circumstances that are there. So I'm very grateful to be here and to we'll continue sharing, we'll continue exchanging, and I'm always open to come again and add my voice from my own perspective. So I look forward to the next forum. Thank you, Anne, for always having me.
Thank you, Zach. Who wants to go next?
I think Peter should finish, so I should speak next. And I'm just so grateful to be able to participate in this forum, and this recognition that love is what it's all about in terms of being able to make good decisions, being able to actually come from a place of love, and all the rest of it really is a construct. So again, I'm very appreciative. Thank you very much, Marianne and Peter and Zach, and it's been a wonderful opportunity to be here with you.
Thank you, Neil. Peter?
Yes, it's all about purpose. I've learned purpose is meaningful life, and you are in control of your life. And most of the people are seem not knowing this. You can change your life by decision for love it, decision or change it change your perception, change your things, your thoughts, or leave your thoughts. That's the control we have in life, and that I've learned the valuable lessons. Thank you very much, Neil, Zach, and Marianne. It was most interesting to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, my dear speakers. And yes, to sum it up in the end, it's all about wisdom and love. May we all have it, and may we all share it. Thank you so much. I'm ending this live talk now. Just a moment.